What is up, guys? I'd like to explain some basic thinking processes, including with logic, metaphysics, and philosophy, and how to know things, right? So, when we look at things like tag arguments, or really any metaphysical argument that has to do with does this thing exist? Is this thing possible? If this thing exists, could it do this? Okay, these are metaphysical thoughts, these are metaphysical arguments. So, we can say, for instance, it is possible that a God exists. Okay, if this God exists, is it going to be omniscient? Must it be omniscient? Why must it be omniscient? So you're making a box. Think of it this way: you're making a box of thought. And in this box of thought, you have your main idea, which is going to be this deity, this God, whatever. And in this box of thought, you're going to use the rules and laws of logic. And you're going to use them in a way to make this argument to be valid. In its box, in its space in your mind, you're going to attempt to make it reasonable, okay? So you can say, it is possible that a God exists. It is possible because we don't know where we come from. We don't know what started the universe, if anything started it at all. You could raise the idea of where did the singularity come from for the expansion of the universe? Okay, well, we know that without time, there is no causal relation. So does there even need to be a start? So this is the way that I think of this as a critical thinker. I think of, okay, there's a singularity. We know that cause and effect is for all things in our observable universe. In our actual world, there must be some cause for an effect, right? So when we look reasonably at the universe, we see an effect of the expansion of the universe. Now, here's the thing with that. That expansion is also the start of space-time in of itself. So we go back to the Planck time of t equals 0, or as close as we can get to it. We're not actually able to observe the absolute zero. Our physics break down. Our tools don't work good enough to get to that degree. So we must then think, there's no space-time. Is there anything before at all? So that is when the metaphysic thought of God can come into play. You can say, it doesn't make sense to me that a singularity can exist without having been put there. Now, that can lead you down two different branches of thought. You can go down the branch of thought of it has always existed, or it is possible that it always existed, or also the thought of, to our knowledge, things must have a reason having been put there. But then you have to go down the thought process of, is there actually a necessity for it having been put there? Because if there's no space-time, there's no causal relation, then it doesn't need to have a cause to have put it there. It could be its own first cause. It could have just always existed, which brings us into the bubble theory, or the bouncing theory of universes expanding and then coming back and then expanding and just forever doing this thing. So space-time expands and space-time goes away, and space-time never in and of itself hits an absolute zero. So there's always some sort of a time, and that seems to be the most reasonable explanation as of right now. So this is where the problem arises of trying to prove said God. You have your metaphysical framework box. Remember this box that we made. And we put God as an idea in this box. And then we made up these thoughts, hypotheses, if you want to call it, of, is there a necessity for it? Are there other necessities that could have been? The universe in and of itself can be necessary. Now, here's the difference between metaphysics and the empirical world as we know it. What we do know is the universe exists. We can observe it. We know it's here. It's falsifiable. It's demonstrable. So it is demonstrably true that the universe does exist. The question arising of, could it have always existed, is what seems to scare most theists. And even atheists. Like, some people are still scared of, I don't know, it could be a God. It could be some being. Now, the thought process going into, could a God have put it there? That raises concerns of, can anything not of space-time, interact in space-time? Is that even a possibility? Well, with that, we have to look at how does cause and effect work? Well, Einstein's relativity does explain the mathematics behind that and how it works to interact in space-time. He breaks down the math. I don't know of other people. I'm ignorant. I'm completely ignorant. But what I do know is that cause and effect is due to moments in time from going to A to B with the velocity of time and distance between A and B, right? So, and that's strawmanning the fuck out of it. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a mathematician at all. I am an uneducated fool that reads books. So what we do know is for cause and effect, there must be time. There has to be potential for future. Okay. So when we look at the universe, there is potential for future, but without the time of the past, there's no potential of a first cause having even been there. The first cause would be the start of time. So technically, the first cause would be from the singularity, and it would not have had to have had a cause for it. There is possibility for um, temporal regress. Here's the thoughts, though. That is a hard problem to answer, and we don't have the tools to know. So that's going to continuously be a metaphysical framework. Now you can make up with our God in the box and say it is possible that our God is outside of space-time. It is possible that he is transcendental and can interact with all things because he created all things and he is outside of space-time. He transcends the laws of nature. This brings up a problem. That is a metaphysical framework. It is only in your mind. It is only a hypothetical of thoughts. That is all it is. If you wish for that to become then they're actually true, you must provide data in the empirical world that we live in. And this is where the epistemology comes in. If God transcends space-time and the laws of physics as we know it, how is that possible? And this is where religions get fallacious. Well, God just is, and that's how he works. Well, how do you know that? Well, the Bible says so. Okay, so the Bible is an empirical thing in our world. It's demonstrable. And it is falsifiable. We can go into history as much as we can, look for these events and see if they are true, if these people, these characters are true, if they did things, and how we know that they did these things. You really get circular when you're getting to that point, though. If you are trying to describe a transcendental being making an empirical world, you're missing a lot of data, and the only thing that you can fall back onto is begging of the question saying God is able to because he is God. You are just reaffirming that the premises is true without external data supporting said premises. So your premises could look something like God is possibly transcendental. God possibly made the universe, and the universe has made all these um, laws and of natural nature in accordance with God's desire. That is valid, but it's not sound. Why is it not sound? Because premise one has not been concluded to be true based on a justification of data. It is missing data. It is just begging the question. The conclusion is only true in your mind because you are presupposing that the premises is already true. There is nothing to justify that the premise is true. So, philosophy, you guys hear all the time in my live streams. You hear me say all the time, I hate philosophy. I don't hate philosophy. I hate philosophy used wrong. I don't hate logic. I hate logic used wrong. Um, Logic is a great framework for are we thinking correctly? How do we think about things and how do we come to conclusions? And are these conclusions necessarily true or not? Not necessarily, but actually true or not. Because we have possible worlds, but then we have our actual world. When we read people like Descartes, who I'm actually currently reading through his meditations right now, which is why this thought is coming up. He does a lot of circular reasoning. His thought process is if I can think of it, it must be due to some outside thing. It must be an outside force. I know that my hands exist because I can see them. Things like that, like actual objects is what he calls them, right? Your reasoning can lie to you, though. Your senses lie to you. And we must test our senses. And how do we actually know that anything actually is true is the next question that Christians come up with, or any atheist for that matter. How do you actually know that you do exist? Well, there's no such thing as absolute truths. There really isn't. We can even question math. Um, it is possible that math could be wrong in some possible world. Like there could be a world where the universe was made and it was made in a way that all of the laws were, I don't know, they formed differently. I'm not a physicist, but it is possible that in some world the expansion of the universe happened in some sort of a different way. The energy was slightly different to where photons work different or move different, etc., and that the different types of energies don't even exist as we know them, but exist as other things. Like that, these are possibilities in possible worlds. But we live in an actual world. And in our actual world, we are able to demonstrate things. Things are falsifiable and things are testable. And that is why we have science, to know whether our thoughts are able to be concluded as true beyond reasonable doubt. Nothing is absolutely true, period, like objectively. We consider things like axioms to be true. And that's how we ground our reality in these things that must be consistent, in these things that other things like the laws of nature cannot work if the axioms are not true. If the axioms are not consistent, then our science and our reality as we know it falls apart. Without the axioms of nature, the consistency and non contradicting of those things, then all of our buildings would fall apart because math and physics would not be true. They would just fall apart. So we have to assume that the axioms are true. And that is where the annoyance of axiom becomes. And I'm not a physicist, I'm not a mathematician. I don't understand axioms to a degree of certainty that many other people who have spent their entire lives in education studying. But I do know that we prove things beyond reasonable doubt. If it is unreasonable to doubt it, there's no justification for doubt. So, for instance, the Big Bang Theory, for instance, we have tools that demonstrate that it is true beyond a reasonable doubt, and it doesn't contradict other laws of nature that we do have based on these axiomatic principles. So we ground our reality in those, and they are proven beyond reasonable doubt. They're technically subject to change, but there's no justification to believe that they will and could change. It's possible. Anything's possible. It's possible for me to grow wings tomorrow. It's possible that unicorns living inside of my asshole made the entire universe. These are possibilities, but they are not proven to be true beyond any reasonable doubt. It is reasonable to doubt there are unicorns in my booty. That is reasonable to doubt because there's no evidence suggesting that that is true. There's no evidence suggesting that this deity, this god in our box, has created anything because there's no demonstration for it. I hope that makes sense. This is a very quick video. This is just my framework of thinking, and I hope that it helps somebody out. My way of thinking is not the true way of thinking objectively. Okay? I am a empiricist. I have no justification to believe that metaphysical thoughts can be true without demonstration of truth. I get asked when I say that all the time, I get asked, how do you know that your thoughts are real? Well, the bare bones answer, I don't. But I don't have a justification to doubt them. If they are tested and demonstrated true, there is no justification for a doubt. So that is how I, as an atheist, live my life. Do I have justification to believe this to be true beyond reasonable doubt? Is it reasonable to believe what I am accepting as true based on the data supporting it? Or is there something supporting it, or is there something that is contradicting it that gives me reason to doubt that it's valid? That is how we're supposed to do philosophy. You have your thoughts, you write down your whys, your reasonings, and you think through them. You make it valid in some form, syllogistic, for instance. But then you take it and put it against the actual world as we know it. If you're unable to demonstrate it, there's no justification for a belief in it. Is it necessarily wrong to believe it? No. But if you're willing to accept truths, or beliefs, I should say, if you're willing to accept beliefs that are false, there's something in your mind that is allowing you and helping you to be fooled into accepting non-truths. And that is dangerous because let's say you accept so many of these things, eventually, and this happens all the time, eventually you hear voices in your head, which is not uncommon for human beings to have hallucinations. And you genuinely reason with yourself for these things to be true, and these things tell you to do bad things. You justify it in your own mind because you're so used to justifying falsities that you're able to reason it to be true. And then you do bad things. This is why it's important to think critically. This is why it's important to get rid of indoctrination. And this is why science in of itself is important. It helps us to know what is true beyond reasonable doubt. And what is a man if you are doubting every single thing? How do you ground your life if you have no justification for your groundings? Think about that for a second.